Maybe you went up against Brock Purdy or George Kittle on Thursday night and you're behind in your fantasy matchup, or maybe you just need help finding a running back this week. Still tons of injuries. We're going to talk about them all. We're here to help you. This is Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports Network. I'm Dave Richard. Katie Mox is here. Jamie Eisenberg is here. We are going to go through starts and sits. We're going to do our player prop challenge. We are presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. And we are going to talk about injuries and that Thursday game between Katie's 49ers. And Jamie's not a Seahawks fan, but I'll just assign him the Seahawks anyway. 49ers won the game 36-24. Huge night for Purdy. Huge night for George Kittle. Huge night for Deebo Samuel. But Brandon Aiyuk kind of came up small, Katie, and you kind of had your eye on Aiyuk since the offseason, really.
Yeah, well, I feel like we talked about it on the show in the preseason, too. And I think, Jamie, you were in agreement with me that probably Aiyuk was not going to have a great year. You feel like you see a lot of these guys that go into these contract negotiations. They hold out a little bit too long. The chemistry is off. So I'm not surprised that he's struggling. There has been some moments, but it also doesn't seem like Purdy trusts him that much because he's not really getting the targets.
Jamie, is he a buy low again?
I think so. I mean, as much as you're concerned about it, and understandably that the full season could not necessarily live up to the expectations of what he did a year ago. There's still the game we saw last week where you see the upside, where you see 100 plus yards, which he basically had at halftime against the Cardinals. You see that there's going to be targets there, and so. The thing that's a little interesting so far for the 49ers is the yards after catch have not been there for them. It's such a staple of their offense. And I think that's still coming because you know who's coming back, and that's McCaffrey at some point.
Is he?
And so I hope so.
Is he?
And so I think as the respect for the run game maybe gets a little bit more when McCaffrey's on the field, as opposed to necessarily not the same respect for Jordan Mason or now maybe Isaac Randall, we'll start to see that a little bit more. But I'm still a believer that Aiyuk can return top 20 value, just not maybe top 10 or top 15.
Okay.
I wonder if it's the haircut, just the fact that he cut the hair off. And,
maybe
that's kind of, he lost his mojo a little bit.
Could be.
Jordan Mason's got some nice hair, and he got hurt. He's got an AC injury to his shoulder. He's expected to maybe miss some time, but not as much time as, say, Christian McCaffrey has missed already this year.
He may play next week.
Hopefully he's back next week. Yeah. Hopefully so. I've got him on a bunch of teams. Seattle. Man, DK Metcalf should have had a huge game. 11 targets, only ended up with 3 grabs. He had a 52-yard touchdown called back. He had another touchdown catch. Well, it would have been a touchdown catch. His toe was right on the chalk in the end zone. So he could have had a monster game. I think people are going to be excited to still start DK Metcalf. And Kenneth Walker, 8 catches. Jamie, our colleague on Fantasy Football Today, told us, Adam Azer told us, 30 or more routes run for Walker each of the last 3 games. Certainly a must start moving forward. I just don't know if the rushing yardage, was that a byproduct, you think, of the matchup? Because 32 yards for Kenneth Walker just isn't that much.
I think it was a byproduct of the matchup. When they got behind, you never expect them to stick to the run despite what Mike McDonald was trying to accomplish in this game. And that's really been what's, I think, escaping him, certainly the last 2 weeks. You saw the game against Detroit. He was fantastic in that regard. So we'll see what happens with the run game moving forward. I hope they're not going to make a change and decide to give Zach Charbonnet more work. Walker's got top 10 upside at his position, if not top 5. He continues to be a factor in the passing game.
Big game for Tyler Lockett. He seems to be a boom-bust flex moving forward. Jackson Smith and Jigba came up small, but he's going to have his games where he has huge catches like he did, I don't know, a few weeks ago. They're at Atlanta next week. Should be a high-scoring game. I kind of like a lot of the Seahawks for that matchup. So that's a wrap on the Thursday game between Katie's Niners.
Wait.
What?
You didn't ask me about my takeaway from the game.
Well, what is your takeaway
My
from the game?
takeaway from the game is don't fade George Kittle on his birthday. 2 touchdowns last night. His birthday is October 9th.
Okay.
Last year versus the Texans, he had 3 touchdowns on October 9th. So if you're looking ever at a time to give George Kittle multiple touchdowns, it's on his birthday.
Can he have a birthday every week?
Please.
Can we make that happen so that he can be the one tight end who's going to be awesome?
There's a trend here. Multiple touchdowns in and around October 9th. So we'll have to remember this next year.
We will get to tight end injuries in a second. First, let's start with the quarterback injuries. And this is going into week 6. There's a lot of names on the quarterback list, but I don't think there's a lot to really worry about. There's one name, Anthony Richardson. Looks like he's going to start for Indianapolis, practiced in full all week long. Jamie, where do you have Richardson ranked?
Richardson is not a top 12 quarterback for me. 17th. I would not try to start him if you can. Tough matchup against the Titans. He has not played well. He's coming off an injury, and now he doesn't have his best receiver. So everything kind of working against him right now. So if you can sit Richardson, do so.
Let's take a look at the running backs, and there are a lot of them, but there is some good news on this list. Both the Bengals running backs that you will see on this list, Chase Brown, Zach Moss, they will play.
Wow.
They are good to go. Chase Brown really has looked good over the last couple of weeks, certainly been more efficient than Zach Moss. I would expect Moss to play in that passing downs role, Chase Brown to be in that rushing role. The Giants' run defense, not that great. I think they could both be really good for fantasy managers. Jamie, from this list, are there two names that really kind of scare you other than, Ramondre Stevenson, Jonathan Taylor? I don't think anybody's expecting them to play. But who on this list are you nervous about this
I'm just looking at news right now. So Shane Stankin has just ruled out Jonathan Taylor.
Okay.
Excuse me. We have Brian Daboll saying that Devin Singletary's groin injury is still a problem, so that's something to keep an eye on. If you picked up Tyrone Tracy, don't drop him yet. Jalen Warren actually practiced in full on Friday, so he's now going to get upgraded potentially from a limited dezonation, so we could be looking at him stealing touches and maybe the job from Najee Harris. Harris has been so bad, and the matchup is so good against the Raiders, so Warren's got some flex appeal there. Mixon, if he starts, is a must-start running back. I think the matchup is fantastic against the Patriots. They've been miserable. And then Travis Etienne, you just got to keep an eye on what's happening there. I think Tank Bigsby has earned enough of an opportunity to be at least a flex play. We got to find out about James Cook on Friday, more most likely Saturday at this point, but Ray Davis and Ty Johnson would be in play as at least flex options against the Jets. So there's a lot working at the running back position right now.
The Robinsons, Bijan Robinson, limited in practice on Thursday. He popped up on the injury report. We need to see where he's at on Friday. Hopefully he's good to go. And then Brian Robinson, a game time call, according to Dan Quinn. Let's move over to the wide receivers that you're going to be checking out on the injury list. And this list is still pretty deep, too. We know that Malik Neighbors has been ruled out. That's 2 weeks now that we won't have him. Not that it's hurt Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones had his best game of the season last week without Malik Neighbors on the field. Darius Slayton, a wide receiver that you can go to. Both Eagles wide receivers should be good to go. I would certainly not expect Devontae Adams anytime soon as long as he's in a Raiders uniform. And Jacoby Myers, he's kind of been like a sneaky PPR play. I don't know if I can count on him to be a reliable option, certainly if he's not practicing by Friday. Stay with CBSSports.com for all the injury information leading up to Sunday. We will have it. We will let you know who's in and who's out. Jamie, Darnell Mooney's a name we'll talk about later, but I just want to give you a second here. Assuming he's good to go for the game, and I think he should be, what do you like about him this week?
He's a must-start receiver at this point. What he's done so far this season, how he's been connecting with Kirk Cousins coming off the game last week. Look, it was a lot of volume for the Falcons in terms of how they attacked the Bucs. They're not going to see that many pass attempts against the Panthers. But his production has just been fantastic. He's playing off of Drake London and Kyle Pitts very well. A lot of single coverage, a lot of mid to deep throws that are connecting right now, and not necessarily just a dink and dunk type of receiver. The separation has been great. I think from what Adam Azer said to us on our podcast today, among the league leaders in 20-yard receptions at this point. So with what he's doing, how he's connecting with Cousins, how Cousins is starting to look better, matchup, everything's sort of falling in line for Darnell Mooney to be funny a must-start wide receiver.
I thought you were about to say Drake May there.
Drake Mooney.
You might have May on the mind.
I combine London and Mooney.
It would be funny to do that. And certainly we know that Kirk Cousins has been going to those two guys quite a bit. All right, tight ends. He's been going to Kyle Pitts a little bit too in Atlanta, and that's good to see. Kyle Pitts not on this list, but Tyler Conklin is. Evan Ingram is. It looks like he's expected back this week in London against the Bears. Not a bad option if you're looking for around 10 PPR points. Maybe he's got an outside shot to score a touchdown. Certainly better than almost everybody on this list except for Tucker Kraft. Man, Tucker Kraft has been good the last couple of weeks for Green Bay. He popped up on the injury report with a groin injury on Thursday. We will see what his status is come Friday and beyond. David Njoku also has told reporters that he will play. Taysom Hill still on the list, hasn't been practicing. I'm still trying to stash him when I can because we know what he is capable of doing when he's back on the field for the New Orleans Saints. When we come back, or actually before we go to break, can I ask you guys to answer a tweet? And this is it. It's from Dustin. Would you trade? And this one,
wow,
this one's pretty heavy, man. Trade Brees for Alvin Kamara in half PPR. What do you think, guys?
I'd rather have Brees Hall, so I would not be making this trade.
Has Brees earned enough? What do you think, Katie?
Wow. I guess I'll agree with you on Breece. I don't know. I feel like you can't go wrong with either of these guys.
I think the time to buy low on Breece Hall is now. We talked about it all week long. He certainly has been terrible the last couple of games. Kamara's been good. If you're going to go rest of season, I think it makes sense to go with Breece Hall there. So
the best of Kamara is probably behind him, just based on what we saw. I don't think he's going to get better than what we saw in the first 2 games. And you have an older running back with a quarterback that's now out for who knows how long. They're changing coordinators in New York, so hopefully that's a plus for Breece Hall. And their offensive line is getting healthier. So
I hope so.
I would lean toward Hall rest of season, but it's tough to trade Alvin Kamara at this point based on how he's performed. But if you're just asking in a vacuum, who would I rather have? I'd rather have Breece Hall.
Breece Hall rest of season over Alvin Kamara, and I do hope that offensive line gets better for the Jets. When we come back, let's go through some start-sit simulations. I just thought of that. I don't even know if that's really true.
In the simulator?
I'll give you we're not cool enough to have a simulator, Katie, but we do have some rankings discussions to have with you coming back here on Fantasy Football Today. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. It's time to talk about starts and sit at running back and quarterback, but let's start with Jamie Eisenberg, start of the week. You like Tony Pollard this week to have a monster game.
Yeah, it's a great setup for him. Last time we saw him at over 18 PPR points against the Dolphins, had 22 carries in that game. 3 or 4 games so far this season, he's been very good. We got the story this offseason. It was going to be him, Tyjae Spears splitting work. We really haven't seen that to the same level that I think they had given us the expectations of. But we did see Spears get 15 carries last time against the Dolphins. So with Levis back, I don't think we'll see a similar heavy running back approach like that, but I still think we're looking at 15 to 20 total touches for Pollard against a Colts team that couldn't stop Tank Bigsby last week. They're number 9 in most fantasy points allowed to the position. So it's a great setup for Pollard. He's got top 10 upside, if not top 5 upside. And I think Tyjae Spears could also be a flex. It's just a great situation for Pollard and Spears to walk into taking on this Colts defense.
19 or more touches for Tony Pollard in 3 of his last 4 games. Dare I say he's being used properly and is better than when he was with the Dallas Cowboys a year ago. So
he's healthier.
And he's definitely healthier. So yes, a number 1 fantasy wide receiver. We are going to start Tony Pollard over everybody that we're about to talk about in this segment. He is a must-start fantasy running back, but we're going to give you some names of guys who aren't necessarily must-starts at running back. And I'm going to ask you, Jamie, to rank these 3. Let's start with our first one. It's Travis Etienne of the Jaguars taking on the Bears in London, Najee Harris against Las Vegas, and Javonte Williams against the Chargers. Who's your favorite of the 3?
So this is going to be with an asterisk because the fact that Jaylen Warren got a full practice in makes me a little bit nervous about him. So right now it's Najee Harris, Javonte Williams, Travis Etienne in terms of the order. But if we find out that Jaylen Warren is going to play, which is the way that it's headed, I'm going to go with Williams over Harris in that regard. So for now, we'll go with Harris, Williams, Etienne. But by the end of the day, it could be Williams, Harris, Etienne.
I've got the same exact order as you do. I like Najee. I love the matchup. And I really hope that Jaylen Warren kind of takes one more week off so that maybe Najee gets going against the Raiders, because the Raiders can't stop anybody. And they just lost Christian Wilkins. So I don't like Christian Wilkins is one of the best defensive tackles in football. The fact that he's not playing, that's a real problem for them.
With Wilkins, a running back every week has gotten 15.5 PPR points or more. So the track record's there. The
point I want to make about Jaylen Warren, though, because you're right, he is somebody who should be on every single bench at this point right now in fantasy. He's available in like half of CBS Sports leagues on Yahoo, on ESPN. If you play on those sites, he's going to be available in even more of those leagues. This is somebody that you can add to your bench and potentially have a starter, a number 2 fantasy running back, certainly in PPR, if he gets the opportunity, if Najee Harris keeps stumbling along like he has been. But Katie, for this week, let's just say there is no Jaylen Warren. Najee Harris, is there a prop you like on him?
Well, yeah, that's what I was going to say, is that I hope that Jaylen Warren is not playing in this matchup, because I like Najee Harris over on his rushing yards. It's at 66.5. Like you said, it's a good matchup for him against Vegas, who has been really bad against the run. They're allowing about 5 yards per carry. If there is no Jaylen Warren, we hope that this happens. He hasn't gone over this in a couple weeks, but if he is the lead back, then I think 66.5 should be.
No touchdowns yet for him, so he's due.
Yeah, he's overdue for a touchdown. Jamie, we know that Ramondre Stevenson did not practice this week. Antonio Gibson versus Najee Harris. Would you take Gibson over Harris if Jaylen Warren's active?
Yes.
Okay, because Gibson could be a one-man show for the Patriots.
Yes, so you're looking at a very heavy workload, and Drake may make this offense hum. So if things turn around, he'll probably throw 4 or 5 passes, just based on how this offense operates. And he should have an opportunity for probably 50, 60 rushing yards. So just looking at the situation, I would take Gibson over Harris if Warren is playing.
I think Gibson's available in over a third of CBS.
It was 62% as of yesterday. So I'm going to guess it's probably going to bump up to about 75 by the end of the day.
Yeah, and by Sunday, he'll be rostered everywhere. So if you're watching us now, pause what you're doing. We'll be here when you come back. Get Antonio Gibson on your bench. Let's take a look at Twitter poll results. We posed this same question to our audience, and they're with us on this one. Najee Harris across the board, a slam dunk. So real quick on Travis Etienne, Jamie, where do you have him ranked, and what do you expect for him against Chicago?
He's like 23, 24, depending on the format. I still think he's the best running back for the Jaguars, but with the way Tank Bigsby has operated in the last 2 games, 7 for 90 against Houston 2 weeks ago, over 100 yards rushing against the Colts last week. This is a little bit of a step up in competition, but not by much. And so I think you're looking at Bigsby probably getting the opportunity to be the first and second down in terms of touches. Will he work in the passing game? Probably not. He's only got 1 catch on the season.
Yeah.
So if they're chasing points, which is what I think is going to happen, because I think Chicago is going to win this game, then I think we see a little bit more of Travis Etienne. So I lean more toward Etienne in this game than I would in Bigsby in PPR. Not in half PPR. It's a little bit tougher argument. But Bigsby should 100% be rostered. And if we need a running back this week, even with Etienne playing, I think he could be at least a flex.
Outside of my top 24, but barely for Tank Bigsby. Okay, let's take a look at 3 more running backs that we're going to rank. And these names aren't even as pretty as the names that we just went over. It's J.K. Dobbins. It's Rico Dowdle. Shout out to the hair, Rico. And Rachaad White. Rachaad White was drafted to be a must-start fantasy running back, and now here he is being compared with J.K. Dobbins and Rico Dowdle. Jamie, how would you rank these 3?
Yeah, one of these is not like the other. Dobbins is a must-start running back, and Dowdle and Rachaad White are more flex plays. Dobbins has earned the opportunity and performance, and even though it's a tough matchup, I think to be considered a must-start running back, you see we're much lower consensus-wise than Sportsline is. They think he's got top 10 upside, and I get it. Especially if Gus Edwards doesn't play. He's been on the injury report for the first 2 games. Dowdle has been awesome the last 2 weeks, mostly the Steelers game by comparison to 2 weeks ago, but tough matchup. Detroit's number 3 in fewest fantasy points allowed to the position. He doesn't catch the ball enough to think, okay, he can survive that way, even though he has caught 2 touchdowns the last 2 games. And then for Rachaad White, he's hurt. He's playing a tough matchup. The Saints have been really good against opposing running backs. So I actually prefer Dowdle over White, but I think Dobbins clear distance from the other 2 guys.
I agree with you on that, and I do think that Rachaad White is someone that we do have to monitor. He didn't practice on Thursday, and not only him, but their rookie center, Graham Barton, did not practice on Wednesday nor Thursday. And if he's not there, that offensive line is worse, and that could mean more catches for Rachaad White. That could be interesting. That could help him in PPR, but he's somebody that I'd be nervous about starting, but I'm even more nervous to start Rico Dowdle. But there's someone here who's not nervous about Rico Dowdle, and her name is Katie, and she's going to tell you why Rico Dowdle deserves some attention.
No, I'm fading him. I'm taking him under. No. I'm with you guys on this one. I'm fading Rico Dowdle under 41.5 yards. And Jamie, like you just said, he's coming off his best game with 87 yards, but that was more of an outlier. He's fallen below this mark at 41.5 in 3 games, averaging closer to about 30 yards per game. And like you said, Dan Campbell, obviously very, very tough against running backs, allowing the fewest rushing and receiving yards to the position. So I think it's going to be a tough one for him.
So, like I said, Katie can't stand Rico Dowdle. Doesn't want anything to do with him this week.
I actually love Rico Dowdle, but not this week.
Not this in our Cowboys room with all the blue and white.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's see if the audience agrees with Katie and Jamie and me about Rico Dowdle. They do to a degree. They agree that J.K. Dobbins is the best guy to start of the 3, but they've got Rico Dowdle next and Rachaad White last. Maybe the injury has something to do with that, because if Rachaad White's out, obviously you'll start Rico Dowdle, but you don't want to do that. Let's move to quarterbacks, and this is an interesting one, because Anthony Richardson's back for the Colts. He's taking on the Titans.
Not officially.
Shane
Steichen said he's a game-time decision.
Okay, he's been practicing in full. Let's assume, for the sake of this segment, that he's playing. Rank him versus Daniel Jones and Jared Goff, Jamie.
I would go Goff 1, Jones 2, Richardson 3. I'm nervous about Richardson in his first game back, taking on a really good Titans defense coming off their bye week. He's clearly not 100%, even though he has practiced in full. And I think Shane Steichen is just being cautious, but he is expected to start. Then you lose Michael Pittman, so he's down his best receiver. So you can make the same argument, okay, Daniel Jones is down his best receiver, but Daniel Jones has been a very consistent fantasy option for the majority of the season. Goff is clearly coming off his best game. So I like the setup for Goff in a high-scoring matchup. I like the setup for Jones against the Bengals, where he's probably chasing points, and Richardson's got to prove it at this point.
I want to start by saying that I like all three of these quarterbacks. I don't mind starting any of them this week, but the one that I like the best is actually Richardson. And I know he lost his best receiver in Pittman. I don't know if Pittman's been doing a ton for him anyway. We've seen him throwing downfield. Those passes have been going to Alec Pierce. If Josh Downs plays, that's a guy who's going to be a nice short area target. And I think back to the Titans matchup against Green Bay a few weeks ago, and it was Malik Willis under center for the Packers. And Malik Willis ran wild, and he still threw for 200 yards in that game. So I don't love Anthony Richardson. I think he's 12th for me in my rankings. Yeah. And I agree, he's a risk. But I think he's got the highest ceiling of the three of these quarterbacks. I think all three of them can get you at least 20 fantasy points. What I'm worried about with Goff, because Goff is third for me on the list, is what happens when the Lions get inside the red zone. They run the ball. And so there might be a chance at limited touchdown potential for Jared Goff. I do think Daniel Jones, though, 22-plus fantasy points in 3 of his last 4 games. I think he's for real. I think the offensive line's doing a great job with him. And I think the matchup is good against Cincinnati as well. So that's how I would rank them. Richardson 1, Jones 2, Goff 3. Literally the exact opposite of Jamie. So I don't know if we really helped anybody here. But maybe you can help us out on Jared Goff.
Look, I don't know if it's because I'm a 49ers little hater here, but Jared Goff going 18 for 18 last week and just being absolutely perfect. He's on record to get 25 straight completions. If he gets that, he would break the record. I just don't believe it. So I'm taking him for an interception. He didn't throw one last week, but he's thrown one in every single week. Now, it is slightly juiced at minus 135, but you know they're going to throw the ball a lot. This is a very pass-heavy offense, and they're going to try to get him this award. He's at 19 completions so far. 25 would get him the record. He's thrown an interception.
Ben Johnson, the office coordinator, did say it's not a priority.
They say that.
But that's the one thing is, will there be conservative throws to get him the record? Or will there be, okay, he's going to challenge some tight windows?
Yeah.
The nice thing about it for Goff, no DeMarcus Lawrence, no Micah Parsons.
Yeah.
He's going to have all day.
Yeah.
Even their backup defensive end, Marshawn Nealand, isn't going to play in this game. So he will have all day. And his offensive line is getting healthier. Frank Ragnow is back for Detroit. Maybe I should think twice about this Jared Goff thing. Okay, let's take a look at our Twitter results. Let's see what the audience thinks. And they're with Jamie. Jared Goff, runaway winner there, 58%. And Anthony Richardson, third there, 11.2%. Maybe I need to do a better argument or give a better argument to start Anthony Richardson in week number 6. Before we go to break, let's answer a question from the folks on X. It's from Lord Hendricks. Start Mike Evans against New Orleans and Marshawn Lattimore, or George Pickens against Las Vegas, or Jalen Tolbert against Detroit. Jamie, who's your favorite of the 3?
I'm nervous about Evans, but I would still start him over Pickens and Tolbert. We have no idea what's going on with Pickens in terms of how much Arthur Smith will use him and if there's going to be either a squeaky wheel game or a punishment game based on how last week went for him against Dallas. And while I like Tolbert, his ceiling is maybe as high as both these guys. I still need to see it from him on a more consistent basis, so I'm going to stick with Evans even in a tough matchup against Lattimore.
He's got the toughest matchup of the 3. As long as George Pickens is active for the game, that's all I care about. I'm going to start him ahead of Evans and ahead of Tolbert, but I do like all 3 of these guys as number 2 fantasy wide receivers. Just a quick note, 9 straight games, Mike Evans has had 13 or fewer PPR points against the Saints when Marshawn Lattimore's played. It's a gross track record. I'm hoping that he breaks that record. I know that our podcast host, Adam Azer, thinks that he will, but I am nervous about Mike Evans this week. When we come back, speaking of wide receivers, we're going to do nothing but starts and sits with wide receivers to help you out for the upcoming matchups here on Fantasy Football Today. Man, if you need wide receiver help, you are in the right place. We're going to go through some starts and sits at wide receiver for week 6 right now here on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. And let's start right off the top with 3 wide receivers that we've already kind of talked about and might even differ on a little bit. Darnell Mooney, man, did he have a monster game last week. He's at Carolina. That looks like a good matchup. Chris Olave against the Bucs. Jameson Williams against Dallas. These are 3 guys that fantasy managers are going to want to put into lineups, but what order should they prioritize them, Jamie?
For me, it's Mooney and then Olave slightly ahead of Jameson Williams. Mooney's just been fantastic. Matchup is great against Carolina. I would not go away from him. You have a new quarterback for the Saints with Spencer Rattler. I love that he said, when Olave's on the field, I have to get him the ball. That's a little bit something that we don't see from Derek Carr all the time. So that's one that'll be a little tricky for me because Rashid Shaheed's banged up. So we'll see if Shaheed's going to play. If Shaheed's out, that would make Olave a little bit more attractive. Jameson Williams, the concern I have is 5 targets in his last 2 games. Now, we've only seen 41 pass attempts from Jared Goff over that span. But he's been so explosive, did have 2 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown against the Seahawks on minimal attempts. But he's just so hard to sit. So right now it's Olave slightly ahead of Williams. But definitely I would go with Darnell Mooney over both.
I've got Williams third on my list as well, but I'll put Mooney second and Olave first. And it's really more of a PPR versus non-PPR thing. I think if it's non-PPR, I'd probably put Mooney first ahead of Chris Olave. But I do think Olave is going to be that primary target for Spencer Rattler. I think that Rattler is going to just try and be in a timing-based offense and just make things simple. And what's simpler than just throwing to your number one wide receiver? And
Derek Carr doesn't do that. That's the problem.
Well, Carr was throwing downfield a lot more, and that's why Rashid Shaheed was such a thing. And you said it, if Rashid Shaheed does not play, obviously it changes the entire Saints offense just in general, but I think it opens the door for Chris Olave to see double-digit targets. He's 24th for me in my rankings, and Mooney's right behind him, and then Williams is third. So these aren't guys that are like must-start, slam dunk, fantasy heroes, but they've got the potential to be good for your lineup. And so I do like Olave first. I like Mooney second. I like Jameson Williams third. Katie, how much do you like Chris Olave this week?
I love Chris Olave this week. I'm taking him over on his receiving yards at 45.5. Last week was tough for him versus the Chiefs. Obviously had a hard time up against that pass defense. And like you said, Derek Carr didn't exactly favor him that much. So I think either way, Olave was going to see more targets, more yards this week, but he has a really good quarterback. I think there's more of an upside here with Spencer Rattler, which is kind of what you guys talked about as well, just because of the chemistry that they have and the things that they've been saying, all the complimentary things that they've been saying about each other. So I think this is a good game for Olave, and his yards at 45.5 do seem rather low to me. Again, last week was more of an outlier. He is averaging well above this.
I think we are both on the same page. Yeah. I don't like him, but I would take the over on this.
Great.
Right. So, and you think that Mooney definitely has more upside, and certainly, like if I asked you which of these receivers, well, this is an interesting question, which of these receivers has the best chance to catch a 50-yard touchdown?
Oh, it's Jameson.
We'd say Jameson. We wouldn't even say Mooney, or we'd say Olave. But who would be second on that list, given who the quarterbacks are? It would be Mooney, and then Olave would be third. So I think with Olave, you're banking on volume, and certainly with a rookie quarterback, that is a little bit something
maybe not looking
to be concerned
at his
about.
Longest reception.
Yeah, you might want to take the under on that, but the over on his yardage. But now let's see what you guys think of these 3 wide receivers. We polled you guys on X, and you guys are all in on Mooney. It's not even close. 55% for Mooney. Olave's third. Jameson Williams is second. I think people just do not want to trust Spencer Rattler in his first start against Tampa Bay. By the way, and this is to your point, Jamie, Tampa Bay's secondary and defense in general is getting a little bit healthier. Anything that they can add to their defense will slow down Chris Olave. Let's go to the next group of 3 receivers. And this is kind of a sketchy list. It's Amari Cooper against Christian. I'm being complimentary. What can I say?
Sketch balls.
Cooper, Christian Kirk, Calvin Ridley. I would have dinner with any of these guys, no problem. But when it comes to fantasy, I'm a little sketched out about them. Jamie, which one are you least feeling the sketchy moniker for?
It's Ridley. I mean, look, he's been bad. He's had a real tough start to the season. Will Levis, according to Brian Callahan, is going to play, so that's a positive. But he's got to prove it, and this is a prove-it game because the Colts have been so bad against opposing wide receivers. I think we'll see him have an opportunity to step. But whenever he's not facing a tough corner or a tough matchup, he's performed well in his career, certainly his recent career. Yeah. And so this is one of those games where the Colts have just been awful against outside wide receivers. So this should be a game where he steps up. Kirk now has Ingram back, taking on a good Bears defense. I know they're a little bit banged up in their secondary, but crowded receiving core as a whole. And we know Thomas will get his opportunities. Kirk last week, I think, got lucky with his chances. And if the run game gets going, then I think that takes away from Kirk. And Cooper scares me the most. He has the best matchup of the three, or at least, in contention with Ridley.
Yeah.
But he just has not done anything with his targets. And so while the Eagles are bad, they give up a lot of production to opposing receivers. I just can't trust it at this point. So I still would take him over Kirk, but Kirk and Cooper are guys that I would like to fade. Really, I would like to start.
Kirk I've got over Cooper because I just really don't want to trust anybody on the Browns. Maybe that changes a little bit if their offensive line is totally healthy and they've got a bunch of their starters from week one playing to protect Deshaun Watson so that he can throw a catchable ball.
Yeah, I'll tell you, they just gave their injury.
Yeah, so let me know on that. But I think that Kirk is in the middle of this list, and I agree with you. More of like a number 3 wide receiver. I think Calvin Ridley's a number 2 wide receiver. I'm excited about him this week. That matchup is juicy. Not only will they take downfield shots with Ridley, but we saw it in their last 2 games. His A.dot shrunk a little bit. And I think that that'll help him just be in line to catch more of those passes inside of 10 yards, make a play after the catch, use that speed that he has to go to the distance for a touchdown. Christian Kirk is on your mind.
Yes.
Jack Conklin, I'm sorry, will be active.
Okay, so that's an upgrade.
And that's the only one that's changed.
All right, not much of an upgrade for that offensive line. Christian Kirk,
Jamie
what do you
has the
see?
finger on the pulse. Yes, Christian Kirk. I agree with what you're saying, but I do, maybe you'll agree with me on this again. I do like him over on his receiving yards. The line is at 43.5. He has gone over this number in 3 straight games. While I do think that Evan Ingram is going to cut into that a little bit, I don't know that he takes over completely. I think they kind of get him in where he fits in. And even though this Bears defense has been really, really good against the pass, they have given up the third highest completion percentage to the slot. So I think that's a really good thing for Christian Kirk here. And this game is in London, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where Trevor Lawrence comes alive.
Hopefully.
Hopefully, for all those receivers.
I do. I think, if you were to say it's in the 60s, I would say I'd be a little bit concerned. 43.5 is an easy number for me.
I think he can get that on like 3 or 4 catches, no problem. And I think that we could expect him to do that. Poll results for these 3 wide receivers. Let's see who you guys like the best. Oh, wow. They're going in a totally different direction. They like Amari Cooper the best, Ridley second,
Wow.
Christian Kirk third. I'm not sure if I understand that, but I don't have to. That's what the poll results are. The next rank these 3, Tank Dell versus Jalen Tolbert versus Wan'Dale Robinson. We drafted Tank Dell, but we haven't really been excited to start him. Jamie, is this the week that we should be excited?
You should be excited. I mean, obviously, there's no Nico Collins for the next 4 games, so this is his time to shine. Wan'Dale Robinson, though, is my favorite of this trio, followed by Tolbert, followed by Dell. Robinson's a must-start receiver at this point in PPR. Tolbert and Dell, more must-start 3 receivers.
I like Tolbert a little bit more than Wan'Dale Robinson, certainly in half and non-PPR. Full PPR, man, it's close between those two, but I think Dallas is going to have to throw against Detroit, and I think he's the number 2 wide receiver there. I liked what I've seen from him 3 of his last 4 games. Katie, Tank Dell, what do you see?
Nico Collins on the IR. You got to hammer Tank Dell, right? His receptions line is at 4.5. He's had at least 4 receptions in the last 2 games, and I expect that his production increases.
Let's see what you guys think about Dell versus Tolbert versus Wan'Dale. It's Wan'Dale, 40% close between him and Tank Dell. Nobody's ready to trust Jalen Tolbert just yet. Let's answer a question as we go to break. This is in a half PPR league. Marvin Harrison Jr., J.K. Dobbins, Chuba Hubbard. Pick one, Jamie.
It's Hubbard. He's just been too good, and I don't see him slowing down until Jonathan Brooks is back on the field.
I agree 100%, but don't get disenchanted with Marvin Harrison just because he had a bad game last week. I think he could be in line for a big bounce-back game against Green Bay. When we come back, Katie takes charge, and when that happens, that means the player props are not far behind. The BetMGM Player Prop Challenge is next here on FFT.
Back on Fantasy Football today, and let's recap our BetMGM Prop Challenge. And by the way, this is sponsored by BetMGM, the sportsbook that was born in Vegas. One little housekeeping thing here. James Cook has not practiced for the 2nd straight day. But all right, I was not on the show last week, and it seems like everybody did pretty good. Or actually,
we were over 500.
Everyone was 3-2.
Oh,
I'm 10-10. I'm even on this season. Oh, look at Dave.
Oh, look at Dave.
13-12. Jamie also positive 8-7.
Yeah,
Adam
Azer
Azers.
guy away.
Yeah, I know. Maybe we shouldn't have him. I'm just kidding. We love Azer. All right. So the challenge is I will give you a player and what their prop is, and you have to guess the number, how many you think they're going to have. Let's go with Josh Allen and his rushing yards. How many rushing
Fantasy
yards?
managers are freaking out about Josh Allen a little bit.
It's been lackluster the last couple weeks. Okay, 32 for Jamie.
I'm going to go higher than that.
55. Well, the line is 36.5. So you got that one. I'm with you on this one, but it's not too far from where you are. I do like this over. Has been lackluster the last couple weeks. But the Jets defense has been really good against the pass, not so much against running. And I do think that Josh Allen's just going to have to do everything in this game because the Jets do play up here. So give me the over 36.5 for him.
And you mentioned it when we came back from break. James Cook didn't practice a 2nd straight day. Listen, we don't want this for fantasy, but imagine if James Cook does not play in the game. We know that Ty Johnson and Ray Davis will run the football a little bit, but Josh Allen's going to have to play Superman here. And so I could see him easily getting over 50 rush yards, if not like 70 rushing yards against the New York Jets.
I hope so. I love Josh Allen.
Yeah, we do. By the way, he's not a top 5 quarterback for me this week. Usually he is. Where do you have him ranked?
8th.
Yeah,
8th?
I'm about in that same range, I think. Yeah.
Just because we'll get into that later. Okay, so
Okay.
another quarterback rushing prop. How many do you think Kirk Cousins is going to have?
How many rushing yards
How
is
many
Kirk
rushing
Cousins
yards?
going to have?
Yep.
Oh, way too high, Jamie.
0 and 3. So the line is at a half. And I took the under on this one. It's juiced, you guys. It's minus 175, but we just wanted to have like a fun one in here. He's gone under this in all 5 games this year, has not had a single rushing yard.
After the game last week, he was asked how he's feeling, and he said he saw some lanes open up where his mind said run.
Yeah.
And he said not to do it. He thought not to do it, and he saw somebody open down the field. I think he's going to start to test himself a little bit more.
Okay.
So I don't think we're getting 30 rushing yards from Kirk Cousins.
He's not doing what Josh Allen does.
But I think like what we saw, Flacco had a 15-yard run or whatever it does. I think we can see like one carry over 6 or 7 yards.
Do you have Cousins ranked ahead of Josh Allen this week? Wow.
The only thing I will say about that is even if he does, the Falcons are 6.5 point favorites. So I think we are in danger of kneel downs.
And they need to get their run game going. Their passing game, we know that's good. They need to see what they've got with Bijan and Algier. Hopefully more Bijan, less of Algier.
All right, so let's go back to that Jets-Bills game, which I think is Monday night, right? Garrett Wilson and his receiving yards.
So I know where this number's probably going to be. So do I want to go over it?
You're cheating.
I think I want to go over it. Well, I mean, I'm
just kidding. Okay, 55 for Jamie and 60.
We might have split this one.
So it's 61 and a half.
Oh, okay. So
yes. And I'm with both of you on this one. I'm going under forehand. Aaron Rodgers just doesn't seem to like to throw to Garrett Wilson, which I think is...
He did last week.
Yeah, he did last week, 22 targets. But I think what you might have meant is they're not on the same page all the time. Because that's what I see when I watch them play, is that there are times where, I mean, obviously he completes passes. He had 13 catches last week. But there's times where their timing is off.
Yeah.
And so that makes me nervous as someone that wants to start him. And I don't think there's any way he's seeing 22 targets against Buffalo.
No, they're really good against the pass defense. And you got Rodgers, who's banged up right now with his ankle and his hamstring and whatever. So under 61 and a half, we're all in agreement there. Okay, so Scary Terry McLaurin, and his longest
Baltimore
reception.
Oh, the longest reception he'll have in the game.
Yeah, the longest reception.
So I think as long as I say something that's like in the 20s, I'll be on the over, and that's where I want to be.
42. I love that.
I'm going to say 29.
29. The line is 23 and a half. I'm with you guys. I like the over on this one. He's getting the most targets on the team of 20-plus air yards at 11. So we like him to continue with this. And Baltimore,
I mean, did you see what Cincinnati did last week?
Big place.
And even to Jamar Chase's 70-yard touchdown, you hear 70-yard touchdown, and you think, oh, man, this is going to be a deep ball. It was a screen pass. And he just missed a couple of guys, and he went to the house. Who's to say McLaurin can't do that either?
Yeah. All right, how about
I don't think
Bucky?
he's had a screen pass all season.
No, which is nice.
That is nice. Bucky Irving, rushing yards.
Bucky Irving.
And
this one's kind of...
I love this guy.
So-so. I do, too.
Love this guy. I love his
I've
name.
got him on my bench on a bunch of my leagues. I'm going to be aggressive.
Okay, so we've got 25 and we've got 40. The line is 37 and a half. And I like the over on this one as well. With Rachaad White limited at practice, I think we see more Bucky, and he's been impressive through the first 5 weeks. So I like that. Before we get out of this, let's look at a tweet from Ask FFT. All right. PPR need 2 from Irving, Cooper, Ford, Gibson. Thanks.
How much do
Terry.
we like Bucky Irving?
I know. I was going to say, wow.
Gibson's
what
the
a
only slam
setup.
dunk for me.
I agree.
If Rachaad White is out, and that would obviously change the prop as well, but if Rachaad White is out, it would be Irving and Gibson, no question. If Rachaad White's in, I'd go Cooper and Gibson.
I'm with you, especially since it's full PPR.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here, and we come back. More of this. Ask FFT. You're watching Fantasy Football Today on CBS Sports Network. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. And it's time now for Ask FFT. This one is from Brian Hertz or Jaden Daniels this week. My wide receivers are Devontae and McLaurin. So who do I stack? What do you think, Dave?
It's a tough call between the two of them. I kind of like Hurts better. It's a tough matchup for both too, but I think Hurts is the one, especially with his receivers back, his O-line healthy. I would trust him.
I would trust Jayden Daniels more because he's been better, and I think we're going to see them having to throw quite a bit against the Ravens. So it could be a little bit of a sluggish first half for him, but I think the second half he will look like the Rookie of the Year and potential MVP. So I like Jayden Daniels slightly better than Hurts.
I'm actually stacking also with Jayden Daniels this week, but I do have Hurts also for an anytime touchdown. I think with the offense getting healthier, it's not going to be all Saquon Barkley. I think he's going to get in there.
One guy's got a running back, one guy doesn't.
Yeah, true. All right, next question. All right, this one's from Paulo. No PPR, non-PPR, need 2 Chase Brown, Rico Dowdle, and Joe Mixon if he plays, Jamie.
So he practiced again on Friday. That's a sign, I think, that he's going to be out there, which is fantastic against the Patriots. He's an easy one. And then I would still lean Chase Brown over Dowdle, even though that Zach Moss is going to play. I just think it's an easier matchup against the Giants for Chase Brown.
Agree. Mixon and Chase Brown sit Dowdle.
And Paulo's name is Mets 1989, so he's a happy guy right now. Mets fans usually don't have anything to cheer about.
Usually, it should be Mets 1986, though, not 1989.
It should be. It should be. All right, next question. All right, this one's from Myron and full PPR, Mooney or Olave.
We got to this one earlier in the show. I'm not going to change my answer now. I'm going to say Olave.
Olave?
Yeah, Mooney for me. So I think he's got a higher ceiling.
All right, Myron. Split down the middle. See who you like better on that one. All right, next question. This one is from Adam. Christian Kirk or Keenan Allen or DeAndre Hopkins? That's a name we haven't heard in a while, Dave.
Part of me wants to go to the waiver wire and see if Jalen Tolbert's there. Maybe some other guys as well. If I have to pick from these 3, I'm taking Christian Kirk.
It's a great matchup for Keenan Allen against Christian Kirk, but I think we got to see a little bit more from Allen. Since week 1 when he had 11 targets, we just haven't seen him as involved. And Kirk, I think, just a little bit safer.
Okay, next question. This one is from Alex Perez. Isaiah Likely or someone off the waivers this week. Also, Chuba Hubbard or James Conner for week 6. Isaiah Likely, I think, has a pretty good matchup this week, no?
It's not a bad matchup. The Commanders haven't been awful against tight ends. It's been more wide receivers. You just have to hope he scores at this point because his 2 best games, week 1, clearly a touchdown and a half. He should have had his toe in. Mm-hmm. And then the 2 touchdown game last week. But I'm not going to find anybody off waivers that has as much upside as him because Tyler Conklin and Dalton Schultz and those type of players, while they're good in PPR, likely he's got a higher ceiling, so I would just stick with him. And then I would take Chuba Hubbard over James Conner.
The problem is that he's got a lower floor than Conklin and Schultz and Cade Otton. So, like, it's the option of, do you take a tight end that's going to get you 7 or 8 PPR points, or do you roll the dice on someone that might get you what Isaiah Likely got you last week? I think the Ravens are going to be able to run a lot in this game, and that's usually the indicator for me on whether or not I like their tight ends. I don't like Likely as much as those safer tight ends.
Okay, next question. Oh, from the control room, from Ryan Stryker. Which is a better fantasy feeling, blowing out your opponent or getting last-minute win on Monday night? Oof.
I've got an answer that's different from both of these.
Okay.
I was when Monday night was over, I lost our fantasy matchup in our dynasty league to RJ White by 1/3 of a fantasy point. And then by Thursday, there was a stat correction in my favor. There was a defensive player who had a pass defense. That gave me a 2/3 of a fantasy point win. And now I'm 4-1 instead of 3-2 because of that stat correction. That's the best feeling that I've had as a fantasy manager.
And the blowout's better. You know, it's just it's easier to relax and just I beat Adam Azer by 100 points in 1 week this week, and that was very enjoyable.
Okay, well, I have to ask you guys. So in the FFT Open League, I am 1-4, and Azer knows because
you know what? So am I.
It's awful. But this week I've got Jared Goff, Rico Dowdle, Joe Mixon, which maybe isn't going to work out for us. A.J. Brown, finally back. Tank Dell, finally back. Trey McBride and Jerry. I might win this week.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
Come on,
I would
2
get
and 4.
Dowdle out of there. Look at your bench. You've got Zach Moss on your bench.
You think? Well, he's not projected as well.
I think he's going to be better than... Yeah, it's going to change.
So you want me to take out who?
I would move Dowdle out. Don't drop Dowdle.
No. Move him for Moss.
Yeah, and put Zach Moss in. Okay. And I would tell everybody that.
Tell everybody that. All right.
Well, and Joe Mixon's back. If he's
lineup.
back, then I think that's awesome.
All right, let's just look at the fantasy.
2 and 4 on the way for Katie.
You know what? We're looking up. Oh, well, I'm still not.
Oh, you went up against. Yeah, you went up against Kittle.
Okay.
Jackson Smith. So 1 and 5. I mean, you could still maybe make a run, sort of. Maybe
isn't the worst thing in the world, but we're hoping to do that. All right, that's going to do it for us today on Fantasy Football Today. Thanks for joining us on CBS Sports Network. But you can catch the guys how many times a week?
Every day, all the time.
Every day, all the time.
How about
Wake up in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
Sunday, 9 a.m. We will be live on YouTube and CBS Sports HQ answering questions before the London game even kicks off.
Wow, we love that. You can scan the QR code on your screen right there or listen wherever you get your podcasts. It's Fantasy Football Today, and we'll see you next time.